Usually, animals in the wild will try to stay well away from humans out of fear. So when a tigress approached a lone man, he did not expect the unbelievable thing that she would ask of him. The wilderness has always been a magical place that Joseph loved to explore. Situated in a small rural village in Russia, Joseph was born and raised alongside the magnificent forest which surrounded the village. Throughout his young life, Joseph was taken into the forest by his father to learn how to hunt, track, and appreciate nature's beauty. As Joseph got older, he took up a job as a hunter, as he knew the forest well and knew how to look after himself while getting the best game available. But little did he know that his love for the wild would lead him to a situation that would change his life forever. It all started as a typical day for Joseph. He woke up just as the sun began to rise and headed off into the forest so that he could get a good start on his hunt. A few customers had asked him to get some meat, and he was running low himself, so Joseph entered the forest intending to get a lot done. As the morning wore on, the sun basked the woods in an ethereal glow, which the hunter couldn't believe. Once it had reached midday, Joseph decided to take a lunch break. He had already managed to hunt a few birds and decided to cook one for his lunch. He was in an unfamiliar area of the forest, but Joseph wasn't scared, as he could always follow his tracks back to the village. Ahead of him, the hunter could see a lot of light, which meant there was a clearing, which would be perfect to rest in. But as Joseph entered the small clearing, he never would have expected to find what he did. Standing in the middle of the clearing was a tiger. Joseph froze in fear. The animal had clearly heard the hunter coming, as it was staring directly at him when Joseph emerged from the trees. But despite catching the man off guard, the tiger didn't seem to want to hurt him. In fact, the feline was acting very calmly. Taking the animal's behavior as an opportunity, Joseph quickly raised his gun and leveled it at the beast. Still, the big cat didn't move and stared at the hunter. Confused by the tiger's behavior, and not wanting to shoot the beautiful creature if it posed no actual threat to him, Joseph slowly lowered his gun and began to creep toward the animal. Seeing the man move towards it, the tiger began to take a few steps back, growling softly in a warning. As the animal moved, Joseph noticed that it was clearly a female, as her breasts were full of milk. This meant that she had some cubs nearby. Another thing that Joseph noticed about the animal was that she was clearly limping. Worried about the tigress's health, the hunter softly called out to her as he got closer. This seemed to calm the animal as she stopped growling and allowed the man to get within a few feet of her. Once Joseph was closer to the big cat, he realized that the tigress's wound was much worse than he thought. It looked as if someone had tried to shoot the poor feline and caught her in the back of the leg. However, it wasn't a clean shot, and it had clearly gotten infected to the point that the animal's health was compromised. Upon seeing the horrid state of the wound, Joseph instantly tried to help, but the big cat kept him away with her growls. The animal then did something truly extraordinary. She turned and started to walk away towards the edge of the clearing, but stopped just as she reached the trees. At this point, Joseph began to hear tiny little mews and growls. It was the tigress's cubs. The big cat gently picked up one of her babies from the ground and limped her way back toward Joseph. When she had reached him, the feline gently set the cub down at the hunter's feet. She then turned to retrieve a second cub and left it right next to the first one. Joseph was perplexed and astonished by what was happening. He didn't know what the tigress wanted him to do with her cubs, and he was too afraid of what she might do if he tried to touch them. At that moment, the tigress began to walk away from the hunter and her babies. Joseph was shocked and tried to tell the animal to wait. However, the feline merely looked up at Joseph one last time before disappearing into the woods. The hunter was stunned at what had happened. However, he knew that the mama tiger wouldn't leave her babies if she didn't need to, and he feared that the adult feline knew that she didn't have much time left and wanted to make sure that her cubs would survive. Not wanting to leave the two young tigers alone to fend for themselves, Joseph scooped the animals up in his arms and made his way back out of the forest and back to his home. Once safely back in the village, Joseph decided to take the two tiger cubs to the local vet. He wanted to ensure that there was nothing wrong with the babies so that he could raise them as best as he could. The vet gave the two young felines a clean bill of health and told Joseph how to look after them, including what to feed them and how often as they grew older. The hunter thanked the vet, took the tigers home, and followed the vet's advice to the letter. As time passed, the two young cubs, whom Joseph named Sasha and Alexei, grew larger and stronger. At one point, officials from the nearby city zoo became aware of the two young tigers. They approached Joseph and offered to buy the two cubs from him so that they could become part of the zoo's attractions. However, despite the large amount of money that they were willing to give him, the hunter refused to part with the animals. He believed that he would be betraying the mama tigress who had entrusted her babies to Joseph for safekeeping. Eventually, the time came for the two tigers to be returned to the wild. They had grown into beautiful young adults and knew the skills they would need to survive in the wild by themselves. Joseph was sad to see the animals go, but knew that it was for the best, as the forest was where they belonged. A couple of years later, Joseph was walking through the forest, looking for any good game to hunt, when he suddenly had the idea to go back to the clearing where he had first found the tigress and her cubs. He hoped that maybe, despite the odds, the two animals that he'd raised would somehow be in the area. Upon getting to the clearing, Joseph noticed that it hadn't changed much, although there seemed to be quite a few odd holes in the ground. Thinking nothing of it, the hunter decided to set up his tent and camp in the clearing for the night before heading back to his home the next day. Looking up from his campfire, he saw a giant grizzly bear coming out of the woods and into the clearing. The bear immediately noticed the hunter and immediately began to charge at him. Joseph realized that he had left his gun in his tent, and so with no other option, he jumped up from his seat and sprinted into the woods and away from the bear. The huge grizzly kept on following Joseph and soon caught up with the terrified hunter. Just as it was looking like Joseph might not survive, two orange and black blurs appeared from the trees and got in between the bear and the man. As Joseph started to calm down, he realized that the two blurs were actually Sasha and Alexei. The two adult tigers made sure that Joseph was behind them as they fought off the angry grizzly. Eventually, the bear got fed up and walked away. Joseph couldn't believe that the two animals he had raised had come to help him in his time of need. After checking that Joseph was okay, the tigers both made their way back into the trees. And although Joseph knew that he would never meet them again, he was delighted to see the two animals healthy and doing well in the environment that they belonged in.